All right, everyone. Welcome to Big 12 Breakdown, where we talk nothing but football 12 months a year, every Wednesday night, approximately 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central. Hey, we might be a little bit late tonight, but thanks for joining us. What we've been doing over the last several weeks, kind of filling that gap between National Signing Day and spring practice, is matching up the Big 12 against every Power 5 conference. So a little less than scientific with the Big 12 this week against the SEC. So we matched up in a stellar matchup against the Pac-12 a few weeks ago at 20-20, and the Big 12 knocking out the ACC pretty decided fashion last week. So and also the Big 10 in the mix as well, and the Big 12 getting the best of the Big 10. So it's the SEC, much regarded in the past 10 years or so as the best conference in college football. We'll see how the matchups work out. So, of course, with 14 teams in the SEC and just 10 in the Big 12, I took out the middle portion of the SEC to try to make it fair. So no Tennessee, no Georgia, no Texas A&M, and somebody else is missing in there as well that I'm not coming up with right this second. All right. What's that, Sean?
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Okay, so we got Sean Cordy from Today's U. We also have Donnie Hazelwood from Crimson and Cream Machine representing Oklahoma's platform on SB Nation. So here we go, Sean. We'll show Donnie how it's done here, and we'll match up the college football playoff team of Oklahoma against the national champion Alabama Crimson Tide, a Sugar Bowl matchup from just a few seasons ago. But here you go. We got the Sooners and the Tide, a blue blood matchup, Big 12 SEC.
And as we've said multiple times throughout the past few weeks, we don't like the transitive property, but you still got to go something along the lines that Oklahoma got beat by Clemson and Alabama national champions. I don't think there's really any way for me to really argue Oklahoma. As much as I really love them, they have great speed, but I don't know how well they can match up with Alabama's defense. And we kind of underestimated how great Bama's offense was, and I think that they could get by with Derrick Henry leading the way, running the ball.
Right, Donnie, your thoughts on Alabama taking on your beloved Sooners?
Well, I mean, maybe I'll be a homer, but no, I don't think I can. Obviously, the transitive property comes into play. I would have loved to be able to see the teams play, but obviously with Clemson beating OU, Bama turning around beating Clemson, I don't see how you could pick the Sooners in this game. Although being on OU's side, I'd love to be able to say that, but I just can't do it.
We have a bit of a transitive property with the Tennessee game as well. Tennessee went to Alabama, took the Tide to the wire in the last 4 or 5 minutes. Tennessee had Oklahoma on the ropes and let them off the hook, and Oklahoma won in overtime. So I don't think a whole lot can be decided there. But it looks like a Bama clean sweep as I jump in. I just think that Alabama defense is a wrecking crew as it was established in 2015, one of the better front sevens we've seen in quite some time. All right, we move down to the 2-seeded game where we've got an Oklahoma State team that took on Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl, and it was a really rough go for the Cowboys taking on a Florida team. So is Florida the second best team in the SEC? I don't think a whole lot of people would size it up that way, but we're going strictly by the seedings, and Florida going 7-1 in the SEC and to the championship game of the conference. Gets that number 2 seed against Oklahoma State, Sean.
Yeah, and it seems like we're coming into a trend this past few weeks that the number 2 seeds always seem to be going above what they were expected to do. Florida is definitely not the number 2 team, but neither is Oklahoma State. So they're kind of on an equal playing field right now. And also, both were probably 2 of the most underachieving bowl teams. I mean, look at Florida getting thrashed by Michigan 41-7. Oklahoma State didn't do any favors either. But you have to look at Oklahoma State. I think they have the better defense or better offense and defense combo, while Florida is really only thriving on their defense. I don't think they can compare offensively against the Cowboys at all. I'm going to take OSU.
All right, Donnie, what do you think about the Cowboys sizing up against the Florida Gators?
I don't know how Florida scores. I mean, maybe on some special teams or, a punt return or something like that. I think if Oklahoma State is able to play mistake-free, or close to mistake-free, I don't see how Florida is able to move the football in any real way. So I have the Pokes pulling it out, although I agree they are definitely not the second-best team in the Big 12.
Yeah, so Oklahoma State obviously got off to that 10-0 start, ran into some three really good teams, culminated with the Ole Miss game in the Sugar Bowl. I'm going to buck the trend here. That Florida defense is devastating.
It is.
Devastatingly good. They held Derrick Henry to like 60 yards until it was complete garbage time in the last drive.
But OSU doesn't run the ball. They can't run the ball.
Well, they wouldn't run the ball. They wouldn't do anything. I just think Florida, and I totally hear what you guys are saying about Florida's offense. Brutal.
Yeah.
They got shut out by Florida State. They scored 2 points. The defense scored 2 points. They got shut out. They might as well have gotten shut out against Michigan, but we're talking about pretty elite teams. I think Oklahoma State is a fringe top 25 team. I know that the record said otherwise, but I think they're in that 20 to 25 range, and Florida probably is too. But man, I just think the meat grinder that Florida went through, I'm going to trust those athletes on defense to somehow win an ugly game.
That's interesting. I can go with that, but I'm going to stick with my guns.
Sure, and I
just don't see it
too, because you got capable quarterback play, and Florida, Treon Harris was atrocious. He's going to play wide receiver for the Gators this year. That's how bad it was. All right, we drop down to the next two matchups I would love to watch. TCU and Ole Miss, that might be the best game for me on the table. Donnie, what do you think about the Rebels sizing up against a fully healthy TCU team, Josh Doxson, Trevon Boykin, and company?
I think a lot of points would be scored. I don't think you'd have the tackle-eligible throwback play that we saw either. Boykin and Doxson, they're incredible. I think the Horned Frogs would win. Now, granted, if it's in Oxford, maybe not, but I would take TCU to pull out the victory in a really close, high-scoring game.
Sean, something tells me we've seen this matchup somewhat recently, and I thought it was going to be a great game. It was not a great game. Obviously, these are teams in 2015 and not in 14. I think it would be a great one. What do you think about this one?
I mean, I think you can go back, look at the playback the past few weeks, and every single time we bring up TCU, it's always the top matchup we talk about, and this week's no different. Personally, Ole Miss was my national championship game pick preseason. TCU was a fringe playoff team for me as well, so this is definitely a top-notch team. And honestly, I'm going to go with Ole Miss. I'm just going to stick with my gut as much as I like what TCU can do and what they did defensively with the injuries that they had. I still think Ole Miss is the team that has a better balance with the Nkemdic brothers, and their offense is just absolutely stunning when they operate at full strength. Chad Kelly especially, he was a Heisman candidate for me. I don't know how the wheels fall off for them late in the season, but I'm going to go with what they were early on, and I'm going to go with the Rebels.
Well, they kind of fell off at different times. They lost to Memphis.
It was weird.
They lost to Florida. I can't think of their other loss off the top of my head, but they beat Alabama.
That game was crazy.
Consecutive year, a loss, and they beat Mississippi State to conclude the regular season, and then again annihilated Oklahoma State. This is a rough one for me. Ole Miss doesn't have a ground game. That would be the big weak link for Ole Miss. But when you talk about marching out like not tons of NFL players like in Ohio State or Alabama, but like 5 elite guys, Laquan Treadwell at wide receiver. You mentioned the Nkemdic boys at linebacker, but specifically Robert at D-tackle. Laquan Treadwell, I mentioned. Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, who may be the first pick in the NFL draft. Like just 5 great players, and their secondary was great. But I like Trevon Boykin, dual threat, getting the job done. Barn burner of a game, great game. TCU wins in my book over the Rebels. All right, we drop it down to Baylor and Arkansas. 2 very different styles of offenses here. Donnie going at it.
Obviously, the Baylor we saw at the end of the year was not the Baylor that we saw with Russell being healthy. I think Baylor's really good. I'll be quite honest. They play about a JV schedule or a high level of high school football schedule. I do think that the problem I have with Arkansas is I don't think. I mean, they're great. They run the football, but they haven't really achieved at a really high level. I mean, and I just think that with the offense, with the fully healthy Russell and with Coleman and all those guys, it'd be close. But then I think in the third and fourth quarter, I think Baylor would win by at least 3 touchdowns.
Wow. Sean, what do you think about this matchup? Donnie certainly points out Baylor winning big, winning a lot of games, but I love, Donnie, we should have had you on a long time ago, the JV analogy for the non-conference games. I'm right there with you. It's an embarrassment, but Sean's going to probably run off the show if I continue. So we get Baylor and we got Arkansas.
I'm just going to put this really simple. I mean, look at Texas Tech, what they did against Arkansas. They won that game. Single digits, granted, but Baylor, they're the big brother to what Texas Tech is, and they have a defense unlike Texas Tech. They can at least hold Alex Collins to something, and also Brandon Allen would be held something in check. But Baylor's offense is the main event there. I don't know if they'd win by 3 touchdowns, but we've seen them pull big wins, and I wouldn't be surprised by it. I'm going to go Baylor, but I'm not sure by how much. It could really vary.
Okay, based on what I see on the field and look at the stat sheet, I think Baylor wins. Something tells me when Arkansas can go through the SEC West and go 5-3 in that conference, that means a lot. Baylor, though, a much more physical team, defensive front 7 and front 4 in particular than they've been in the past. I give the nod to Baylor at full strength with obviously Linwood and company back for the game, Corey Coleman at wide receiver, so I go with the Bears as well, but I think it's a pretty good football game.
And also the coaching matchup is fantastic. You got 2 of the best personalities out there. You got Brett Bielema, who's got his own reality show, and Art Briles better get his own too. So that'd be really entertaining to hear that press game conference.
Very nice, very nice. And so we dip down to the 5 seeds. And we've got LSU, who went 9-3, taking on a West Virginia team that I think this is where the Big 12 may fall off the cliff. In my estimation, Donnie, what do you see here?
I don't see it going well for West Virginia. LSU has talent all over the field except at quarterback, but honestly, I don't think it really matters in this game. I think you see Fournette and more Fournette and more Fournette, and then you have West Virginia trying to play catch-up and the LSU defense causing turnovers. I don't see any way that the Mountaineers keep this one close. LSU would win and win easily.
These 2 teams played about 5 years ago in Morgantown when West Virginia was very highly touted, and LSU went in there and just, laid the wood. Sean, your thoughts about LSU taking on West Virginia?
I think Donnie hit the nail on the head right there. I don't see West Virginia pulling this one out, especially because their defense is mostly pass concerned, and LSU wouldn't be concerned with trying to get that ball moving through the air. They'd be giving it to Fournette just as they did it in the bowl game against Texas Tech. He's right that they wouldn't be able to get enough turnover rate and be able to work with Skylar Howard to work against that Tiger defense. I'm going to go with LSU here.
We'll take a little bit of a break as we're halfway through this to mention that in 2015 the 2 conferences hooked up 4 times. The OU win as a 1 seed against Tennessee as a 6 was the win for the Big 12. Ole Miss over Oklahoma State in the Sugar, LSU over Texas Tech big, and Arkansas over Kansas State in the Liberty Bowl, the 3 wins for the SEC. With 2 games coming up in 2016, TCU, Arkansas, West Virginia, Missouri. The Tigers possibly down after a bad 2015 and losing their head coach Gary Pinkel. So we bypassed the middle of the SEC, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas A&M included, and somebody else in there that I'm not figuring out. So we got Mississippi State, a team that went 9-4, soft non-conference, had to play the meat grinder in the SEC West, demolished NC State in a bowl game, taking on a Texas Tech team that, of course, matched up against LSU, Donnie.
Something tells me that I don't know if Mississippi State could score enough points. I mean, obviously, if you put both teams on the field, you would think Mississippi State would win almost, maybe 7 out of every 10 times. But I think with Mahomes and the receivers that the Tech has, if they jump out like they did against like a team like Oklahoma State, I don't think Mississippi State, even with Prescott, would have the horses to come back. I'd pick Tech. they get out early, and then I don't think Mississippi State can chase them down.
Sean, what do you think about this matchup? We've got, Texas Tech, high-powered offense against the Mississippi State team that's a little bit more balanced, although Dak Prescott obviously carries the mail for that team if we go back to 2015.
I think he's right again. I keep following this trail. He's blazing the trail for me right now. I don't think that they have enough offensive threat aside from Prescott. He was the leading rusher, just having over nearly 600 yards. That's not enough, even though Texas Tech's defense is pretty atrocious. They could probably hold them in check and also throw that ball around with all the trick plays they have that they bring up a new one every single week, it seems. So I like Cliff Kingsbury's squad right now.
All right, I'm going to trust a defense that's probably one of the top 25 defenses in the country against a defense that's probably one of the worst 25 defenses in the country and not even think about Mississippi State winning this by a couple touchdowns to 17 points, something in that range. My thought on that one. All right, now we drop down to Mizzou. Eastern Division champions in 13 and 14 fell off the cliff in 15, taking on the Texas team, and we know the deal there. Played a difficult non-conference schedule. Others should take heed and jump in as well. Notre Dame and Cal, but Texas Tech, man, you got different results week to week. Of course, the Oklahoma win was the high point. So Texas taking on Mizzou. These two teams used to see each other quite often. Donnie, your thoughts?
I don't know if either team would score. Both offenses were atrocious. I've got Missouri with a walk-off home run in the bottom of the ninth, taking it maybe like 14-10 or something, 13-10. Both teams, I know Texas beat OU, I get that, but I somehow think Missouri would probably pull it out. Although both teams, it would be the most boring game of the year.
Yeah, Mizzou's highlight might have been a win over BYU non-conference, 20-16. They went 1-7 in the SEC, I believe, in 4-0 outside the conference. And again, Sean, you know Texas about as well as anyone. Your thoughts about Texas taking on the Tigers of Mizzou?
Oh, gosh, Missouri. Those 20 points were that had to be half of the points they scored this season. They really struggled on offense. I don't know how they were able to pull that off against BYU. But you got to go with Texas by default here, I think. I see that they have too much talent that can come up at any time. They were just moments away, if not for a few special team blunders. They could have taken California. They could have taken Oklahoma State. I like what they can do on offense if everything clicks, and we're going full strength. I got to go with Longhorns.
Yeah, I have to agree. Mizzou beat UConn 9-6. They just were horrendous on offense, and I think Texas's defense would just shut the thing down. And as long as Gerard Hurd would not cough up the football too much, I would think Texas could beat Mizzou, and I'm pretty confident there. So we stay in the Big 12 in regards to bowl teams. Last bowl team on the board at Kansas State, taking on a Vanderbilt team that went 4-8 in the SEC, Sean.
You know, the only game that I watched of Vandy was against Florida, and they held their own surprisingly pretty well. They almost came up. I think it came down to the last drive, 9-6. But I have to stick with the Wildcats here. I just like what Bill Snyder could do no matter what team he has on the field. And should he get that extra talent back that was injured early in the year, I think he'd be able to handle this team fairly well.
All right, Donnie, what do you think about Kansas State bowl loss to Arkansas, finished up at 6-7, taking on Vandy?
You're talking to me. I'm sorry, I broke up just a second. I apologize.
Yeah, you got Vandy taking on Kansas State.
Yeah, I'm with you now. Kansas State is sneaky. That little pop pass and the ability to get the most out of players that just seemingly are kind of afterthoughts by other schools. Mm-hmm. Vandy, to me, they played good against Florida, but playing good and losing just doesn't do it for me. I think the Wildcats, but it'd be a close game, be something maybe like a 24-21, 27-21 victory.
Yeah, Vandy beat one okay team in the SEC. I think they beat either South Carolina or Kentucky. I'm fairly confident Kansas State wins this game against Vandy. Just think they're a football team that competed better against better teams across the board. Okay, we drop down to the bottom two, and we've got a Kentucky team that missed bowl play at 5-7, taking on an Iowa State team that was what the Cyclones are year in, year out for the most part, Sean.
You know, I think these are two teams that are really close to bowl eligibility. It's Kentucky just missing out, and Iowa State, if they weren't playing in the Big 12, I think they could have a pretty good chance at doing this. I like what the direction they're heading with the program. I know we're not talking about what they're doing next year, but they have the pieces to push this through. I think Kentucky was a little bit of a disappointment considering they lost some talent last year, especially with Bud Dupree with being drafted last year. But I'm going to stick with Iowa State. I think they have the offensive power with Mike Warren and three outstanding wide receivers that don't get enough credit just because of the other Big 12 receivers that there are. I'm going to go with the Cyclones.
All right, Donnie, what do you think about Iowa State taking on the Kentucky Wildcats?
You know, if there were divisions in the Big 12, which there are not, if the opportunity for Iowa State to play in a Big 12 North, like Kentucky gets to play in the SEC East, I think that there's no doubt that Iowa State is a bowl team. Mike Warren is incredible. Their receivers are definitely underrated. I think that it would be close again, but I've got the Cyclones pulling out the victory.
I got to go with Kentucky. They've recruited top 20 back-to-back recruiting classes under Mark Stoops. I just think they have too much talent, and I don't see I'm not saying it wouldn't be a close game, but I just have to go with the team that's just brought more talent to the field in this one in Kentucky. And finally, we're at the bottom of the rung, and I think this is where the Big 12 really hurts itself across the board against everyone. But we'll see what you guys have to say, because we got a South Carolina team that stayed within a touchdown of Clemson in the fourth quarter, beat North Carolina, who was the 2 seed in the ACC, and although South Carolina finished 3-9, again, fairly respectable against some decent teams. So Donnie, we'll start with you.
Hope you can hear me. I think that any team on that list beats Kansas by 3 touchdowns at least.
All right, Sean, what do you say?
I'm just going to go quick through their schedule, and this is pretty atrocious. I mean, look, you have Kansas, whose closest game was against an FCS school. And then you have South Carolina that at least lost by a touchdown to A&M, 3 points to Tennessee, 10 points to Florida, 5 points to Clemson. It's fairly close. They can at least pull a competitive game. Kansas, on the first game, and they dropped it when they fumbled the ball. It's a no-brainer going with Steve Spurrier, and I'm going to keep him as the coach. We're going to go with Gamecocks.
All right, it's the September-October South Carolina team for Sean against Kansas.
They did beat UNC.
Pardon me?
They did beat UNC.
Yes, I pointed that out.
Yeah.
But, yeah, they beat the number 2 seed in the ACC. Yeah, South Carolina, you throw them in another conference, and, yeah, they're not going to win. They're not going to finish in the top 5. But they're going to win maybe a couple more games. They'll be fairly respectable. They played fairly well. I will go with the same argument, in addition to the score comparison isn't even close, but the same argument I went with Kentucky and Iowa State. South Carolina is pulling in like top 25 recruiting classes under Spurrier, and Kansas is their recruiting classes are like 85 or 90.
Maybe not even that.
Yeah, so there you have it. So let's see what the math is here on this baby. We got the Big 12 winning 4-7, 9-11, 14-16, and the SEC comes in with 4-5, 8-9, 10, 11. Seriously? Big 12, the SEC, 16-14.
Ooh, close.
Wow. Very nice.
There we have it. Definitive proof. Big 12 is the best conference.
Match them up like that. The Big 12 wins over the SEC. Last year, 3-1 SEC, but 16-14 right here on the big whiteboard. And I'm looking forward, guys, to TCU and Arkansas. I think that'll be a nice little matchup to measure high-quality teams in each conference much like we had with Oklahoma and Tennessee playing a really good game in Knoxville. West Virginia, Mizzou should be a game that the Big 12 can win, but not a slam dunk by any stretch.
And we got Ole Miss in 4 years against Baylor. And Ole Miss against Baylor in 4 years. Mark it on your calendar.
Okay, I'll not.
With the victory, I'm gonna start chanting
now and then to mark that one, but that should be a good one if those two programs can maintain between now and then. So we got Donnie Hazelwood from Crimson and Cream Machine, and also we got Sean Cordy from Today's You. Guys, we appreciate you just having a little fun with us and knocking out these games between the Big 12 and the SEC.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.